But I do want to talk about Tim Walz because, my God, my very first story at Fox News, very young cub reporter, was Swift Boat Veterans for Truth coming after John Kerry and his misrepresentations about his military service. Tim Walz has a Swift boat problem of his own. If you look back at Alpha News, and this is a great news organization, we had them on when they did the documentary about the trial of Derek Chauvin and the smear job by so many against him. I'm not defending, the tape. I'm just saying if you actually watch this documentary, you'll be horrified at what was done to Chauvin by the officials in charge in Minnesota. Anyway, Alpha News vetted Tim Walz hard back in 2018 when he was trying to elevate from congressman to governor, and he did it successfully. And here's the headline: former National Guardsman, Tim Walz is misleading the public about his time in service. I'm going to read you some excerpts. Walz often refers to his military service as he campaigns for governor. However, former members of the Minnesota National Guard are raising concerns over the discrepancies in his story, saying he's misleading the public about it. Tim Walz has embellished, this is a quote, and selectively omitted facts and circumstances of his military career for years, said Thomas Behrens, a retired command sergeant major for the Minnesota National Guard. Walz, 54, this is back in 18, joined the Army National Guard when he was 17, completing 20 years of service. And then in 2001, just days after 9/11, Walz re-enlisted in the Minnesota Army National Guard. He then retired 4 years later in 2005, ostensibly to run for Congress. Okay, so far we're wondering what's wrong with any of this. Behrens says Walz did serve a long and honorable career, but it is his story surrounding his service post 9/11 that raises red flags. The discrepancies start with how long he re-enlisted for. They say, okay, in 2006, as Walz was amid his first campaign for Congress, questions were raised about the timing of his retirement. You see, Walz's sudden retirement after learning that his unit would be deployed to Iraq is what is under scrutiny. He allegedly re-enlisted for another 6 years, which would have taken him well past the time of being they were trying to deploy him. He would have had to stay. He would have had to go and be deployed. And suddenly he got out of it a couple of years early. And what they say is that he quickly retired after learning that his unit, Southern Minnesota's 1-125 FA Battalion, would be sent to Iraq. For Tim Walz to abandon his fellow soldiers and quit when they needed experienced leadership most is disheartening, and it dishonors those brave American men and women who did answer the nation's call and continue to serve, fight, and unfortunately die in harm's way. The governor, or the then congressman, came out and defended this report at the time, saying, after completing my 20 years in 2001, I re-enlisted to serve for an additional 4, right, which would have taken him to 2005. And I retired the year before my battalion was deployed in order to run for Congress. Then Alpha News goes on. However, official documents from the National Guard contradict that story. According to his report of separation of military service, Walz re-enlisted for 6 years. 6 years, not 4, as he claimed. And his service obligation was not complete until September 2007, which was after his unit was deployed and went. The allegation is that he got out of military service. He did not want to go to Iraq. And then he lied about the circumstances around it. Here is Tom Behrens, who I mentioned just a moment ago, speaking about this to Alpha News.
He abandoned us. What the hell kind of leader does that? He just, as soon as the shots were fired in Iraq, he turned and ran the other way and hung his hat up and quit. For Pete's sake, if this guy quit, if I say I'm not going to do it, what the hell kind of leadership is that? If a company would say that we're going to deploy to Iraq or somewhere and you're going to be gone for whatever amount of time, and then a foreman just says, no, I'm not going. What does that say to the 500 people that work in that factory there? When he was a congressman, he bragged that he was a retired command sergeant major. I'm the highest ranking person ever in the House, and all this lie that he was telling. The state of Minnesota came out after 2018, after this was exposed, and they said, well, he can say that he served as a command sergeant major, but he can't say he's a retired one because he's not.
And that's what he was saying.
And he was saying that, and there was lots of lots of cards coming in the mail, for him to be elected. They said right on there he's a retired command sergeant major, just tooting his own horn, just hanging on the coattails of people that actually are command sergeant majors that went through all the process and put all the time in. It's stolen valor is really what it is. I don't know of anybody else that's done what he's done. But we called it the truth about Tim Walz.
Rich, this is potentially bad, especially when you consider he's going up in a debate and otherwise against a former Marine who did deploy, who did not try to dodge, who did go to Iraq.
Yeah. So I have not looked at this personally myself yet. It obviously needs to be litigated. You would think if they're somewhat competent at the Harris campaign, they're aware of this and they've vetted it and they have an answer. But this is the kind of thing that's potentially a torpedo to the bow of any major politician. And it is the sort of thing people tend to shade, right? He wouldn't be the first one, but this will be a major focus. I'm looking outside of this question. I'm looking forward to the debate. Walz is not an idiot, and neither is J.D. Vance. And J.D. Vance, as the cliches has had a rocky start, but he will be loaded for bear and a real professional when it comes to trying to demolish this guy and his records. And I'm sure this clash will be scheduled at some point here, and it'll be fascinating to watch.
The thing is, Batya, you don't lie about your military service. It's not that you can't get elected if you do. Senator Richard Blumenthal and his statements about serving in Iraq, he got elected anyway. John Kerry did not get elected president after the Swift Boat Veterans for Truth came forward about what he was saying. But that was a Minnesota election when Tom Behrens and the others, it's not just Tom. There's Tony Wenzel, retired platoon sergeant for the Minnesota Army National Guard, said he could never vote for Tim Walz as our governor when he abandoned his fellow soldiers like he did. There are others who have come forward and will continue to come forward now. Now it's a national election. We're outside of Minnesota, and there will be plenty of military families who will be determined to get to the bottom of whether Tim Walz might be in a position to send their sons to fight in combat when he was allegedly too chicken to do it himself.
Yeah, I reached out to a number of very close friends who are veterans when I was looking into this story because, I'm bringing humility to this. I haven't served, and Tim Walz did serve 24 years quite honorably, right, in the National Guard. And then he did seem to lie about it. And my friend said this is really unacceptable, both the lying about it, saying that he, retired as a command sergeant major when he hadn't actually completed that service, but also abandoning his men. And, again, as somebody who didn't serve, who didn't go to Iraq, who didn't deploy, I don't know that I would have had the courage to do it. It's the lying about it. It's the covering up the fact that he did withdraw in order to avoid that deployment while his men were sent overseas to fight that fight. Misrepresenting that suggests that he does have a guilty conscience about it, that he does understand that there was something ignoble about that voters don't want to see.
This is not going to go away. He received a warning order to prepare to be mobilized, according to Alpha News, for active duty for a deployment to Iraq in early 2005. And on May 16th, 2005, he retired, leaving his battalion and its soldiers without a key leader as they prepared to go to war. He had no answers when he was served and asked about the papers confirming these allegations. And that's not going to hold, not in this election. It's interesting to me, in part because, Rich, recently you had the Kamala Harris team attacking him as he won't be loyal to the country. He'll only be loyal to Donald Trump. And J.D. Vance heard that and took to the stump and attacked it immediately. We have the soundbite. Watch.
I saw the other day Kamala Harris question my loyalty to this country. That's the word she used, loyalty. And it's an interesting word, simplify, loyalty. Because there is no greater sign of disloyalty to this country than what Kamala Harris has done at our southern border. And I'd like to ask the Vice President, what has she done to question my loyalty to this country? I served in the United States Marine Corps. I went to Iraq for this country. a business for this country. And my running mate took a bullet for this country. So my question to Kamala Harris is, what the hell have you done to question our loyalty to the United States of America?
It's stirring and it's effective.
Yeah, that was good. You know, and he had an event. He's having these so-called bracketing events, as the media calls them, with Harris and Walz as they go around the country. First stop in Philadelphia, and these events that JD is holding, they're not rallies. He'll have some ordinary people come up and talk, have a small group there, and then he's just taking questions from reporters. And he did this afternoon. Highly effective, especially effective when he's making the case that Kamala is hiding via an event where he's taking questions from all comers. Now, it helps to have a sympathetic crowd there that likes everything he says and applauds, right? Any political performer likes that. But it does speak to a huge self-confidence.
If you're tired of the same old coffee from those mega corporations pushing their woke agendas, listen up. It's time to take a stand and support a brand that embodies American values. At Blackout Coffee, they stand with hardworking Americans who believe in family, faith, and freedom. They roast some of the most incredible coffee you will ever taste using only premium grade beans. And guess what? They roast and ship within 48 hours. And that ensures that you get the freshest coffee possible. You could start your day with a bold cup of Blackout Coffee and be delighted just like yours truly. Plus, it's not just coffee, it's a statement. Why settle for less? Make the switch to Blackout Coffee today by heading over to blackoutcoffee.com/MK. Or just use the code MK for 20% off your first order. That's blackoutcoffee.com/MK, and the code is MK. Join the movement. Taste the difference. Remember, with every sip, you're supporting a brand that stands for America. Be awake, not woke. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.